Hi, everybody. I'm Wendy Grant, Director of Marketing and Communications for the Fleet Science Center, and I have with me today Richard Fitzpatrick, Director of Underwater Photography for the new giant screen film Great Barrier Reef, now playing on the Giant Dome screen here at the Fleet Science Center. Welcome, Richard.
G'day, Wendy.
Oh, he's Australian. So in 2016, news went viral that the Great Barrier Reef was dead, but that story was not entirely true, was it?
No, what we had was what we call was the first ever double bleaching event in 2016 and 17. So the two concurrent summers were really hot. And for the first time ever, the corals in the far northern section of the Great Barrier Reefs, the top third, bleached for the first time in history. And since it was the first time that those areas bleached, the mortality rates were quite significant, over 75% for some of those reefs. Whereas the southern reef actually fared really well. There was no bleaching, and it actually had recorded really good coral growth. The thing about the Great Barrier Reef, it's big. It's 1,600 miles long, so that's like Miami to Boston. And
here's a San Diego one. From San Diego to Vancouver, BC. That's about the same
there you go.
distance. Got to be local and relevant. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry for being East Coast on that one. But you can't put a number on it for the whole reef. It's just too big a system. And so we divide the reef up into a number of sections. And and some parts are still looking really good, and but other parts have been hit pretty heavily.
So the reef's suffered, but it's not dead.
It is definitely not dead. And the thing is, where a lot of the tourist operations focus on generally are at the ends of the reef. Now, the Barrier Reef's not one continual reef. It's 2,500 individual reefs. And where the gaps are, where the water flushes, that's where a lot of the tourist operations are, because that's where you get the best coral and the best fish. And because they're close to the openings, they've fared the best during the whole bleaching events. So the main tourist spots are still really good, but it's the back reef areas, the still areas that had never been that hot before, that's what got heavily impacted.
So the film Great Barrier Reef, what is it about?
So the film is basically a snapshot in time of where we are right at this point with the Great Barrier Reef. And it follows a young lady, Gemma Craig. She grew up on the Great Barrier Reef. She's third generation to grow up on this little tourism island that's off Cairns. And she's now an underwater photographer. And essentially it's her going to look at what is the status of the reef, and to look at all the animals, the environments, but to also look at the what people are doing to take care of the reef. Not just scientists, but a lot of citizen science projects as well. Things like the public doing a program called Coral Watch, which looks at coral health. Project Manta, where people take photos of manta rays and it's all photo ID'd to identify them. Community groups taking care of turtles that are found floating in the ocean. That's often because of plastic and things like that and pollution. And then we follow the story of a turtle going through the whole rehabilitation process right up to being released. So it's a big journey, literally from one end of the reef to the other. So people will be able to see all the different wonders of it.
Awesome. So you're a marine biologist specializing in sharks. What sparked your interest in marine biology?
I grew up on the southern end of the Great Barrier Reef. So as a kid, I had marine fish tanks. So I had pet baby sharks for pets instead of cats and dogs. So for me, sharks, all the dangerous marine animals have been part of my life since I was about 9 or 10 years old. And I never grew up.
And do you study a particular type of shark?
I work mainly on tiger sharks and reef sharks. Tigers are my favourite, so I do satellite tagging on those. We work at a place which is featured in the film called Rain Island, where thousands of turtles go each year to lay their eggs, but the tiger sharks follow them as well. And so I've been satellite tagging them over the last couple of years to work out where they go. And we're looking more at metabolic rates. We're putting camera systems on them now, trying to work out more about how these sharks work. And we're also doing this stuff with reef sharks, looking at the effects of tourism on the behavior of reef sharks. So yeah, it's I get to mix the science and the filming world together, which is good.
Yeah, well, how did you make that transition? Because you're an Emmy-winning cinematographer. So how did you get your start in underwater cinematography?
When I finished my degree, I worked in a few of the bigger aquariums in Australia, and I was a specialist in sharks. And I started using video to record their behaviour. We were looking at reproductive behaviour in different species and feeding. And the TV crews coming in for kids shows would come in, and they'd ask me to shoot a little bit underwater video for them, and so that sparked my interest, and I started buying more expensive camera gear. And then there's an Australian couple, Ron and Val Taylor, the famous filmmakers in the 70s and 80s. Like, they did all the underwater stuff for Jaws and other movies like that. And I got to work with them on movies, even as a stuntman in Island of Dr. Moreau. I had to wrestle tiger sharks with for Val Kilmer and Marlon Brando.
Wow.
And yeah, so then Ron, was semi-retired and started pushing a few jobs my way. So I was really lucky to have mentors like that.
Oh, that's exciting. What's special about tiger sharks? Why are they your favorite?
Oh, it's like the poor cousin to the great white. Everyone focuses on the great whites, and for a long time people think tiger sharks are the garbage collectors of the ocean and eating everything. But in fact, they're very strategic animals. They will migrate thousands of kilometres or hundreds of miles
Thank you.
to go to locations to feed on specific things. And they'll go to one area to feed on stingrays, others to go feeding on turtles, others areas for seabirds. So they're very strategic in what they do, and they're amazing navigators. And the good thing about shark biology, and the challenge, is every time you think you know something, you end up with another dozen questions. So it's us trying to use modern technology to sneak peek into their secret lives. And it's a pretty amazing time in marine science at the moment.
How are they at wrestling?
Well, the thing about, because I came from an aquarium background, we're very mindful and stressing the animals out. So I don't like to hook sharks and play them till they're exhausted. So we grab them by the tail. It's one of those crazy Aussie techniques, but it works really well. And if you grab a shark by the tail, it'll stop swimming in less than a minute. Whereas if you hook it and play it, it could take half an hour, and you only get them close to the boat when they're totally exhausted. But when sharks have their tail immobilized, it's like us. If our legs are tied up, we're not going to run or walk anywhere. We're just going to lay there until it changes, and that's what happens with the sharks. So there's a lot of experimentation in the process. So I had to invent like an underwater handcuff to snip and snap over the tail of the big tigers. And a few times it hasn't worked that well in development, like all science, and I've been knocked out on quite a few occasions by these big tails. But we've got the system pretty well down pat now.
How big are tiger sharks on average?
The biggest one we've done was 5 meters. So what's that, 14, 15 feet?
Holy moly.
So bigger than a car. And the tail is about 6 feet high. It's about as high as me when I got tail slapped by them. So they're pretty big and solid. But they're an amazing animal. Like, we don't use cages. We just scuba dive with them. And to be able to get literally close enough to a predator while it's eating that you got to push yourself off it, it's a pretty amazing experience. So I love my tigers.
Indeed, I can tell. That's awesome. How did you get involved in making the film Great Barrier Reef?
We were approached by an Australian company, December Media. They've produced a couple of IMAXs about space.
Yeah, we showed Hidden Universe here at the Fleet Science Center.
That's right, you have, yeah. So they were one of the first Australian companies producing IMAX, and we were working together on another project, initially on the Great Barrier Reef, and then we just said, hey, let's do an IMAX. So that's how it all happened. And then we tied in with McGilvray Freeman Films, which are here in Laguna Beach, and the camera systems are actually built here in San Diego, just up in Poway, by a company called Gates. So they
Local
built
tie-in.
a lot of San Diego tie-ins with this whole production, which is quite neat. So it's really good to come here to. I haven't seen it on the dome myself yet, so tonight's going to be the first time I see it, wrapped around the head. So it's pretty well. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think the audience will be holding their breath as they dive down.
Yeah, and then the funding for the whole project came from my business partner through his the Slattery Family Trust. So Bevan funded the majority of the film, and the interesting thing there is Bevan and myself went to primary and high school together.
Really?
So as we were growing up, there's him, me, and another mate would be collecting these marine creatures ourselves, and I became a marine biologist. The other third mate, he became a marine biologist, and Bevan went off and became this massive IT entrepreneur in Australia. And because of his love of the reef, he and myself were very focused on educating people about the reef making sure people still have a sense of hope and trying to encourage people to change their ways to protect, such an amazing icon.
Oh, that's a great friendship you got going there.
Awesome.
So there's no such thing as a giant screen film that's easy to make. So what were the particular challenges of making Great Barrier Reef?
The size of the big camera system, the 3D rig, it's, 300 pounds, size of a washing machine. So we needed a crane to lift it in and out. Luckily, Bevan owns this really nice yacht that we use for about a year that we're travelling around on the reef with, and so we would
see good friends.
Good friends,
what I said.
yeah, very good friends. It's just a challenge, just the size of the equipment and just the inertia of it underwater.
And then you're trying to get close to marine animals with this giant rig.
It's the hardest shooting I've ever done. So obviously we shot a 3D version and then the dome version as well. So we just used one of the cameras out of the 3D shoot for a lot of the dome shots, but we did do some specific super wides just for the dome version. And when I first started, we'd put that thing in the water and I wasn't moving far at all. But after 12 months or so, I was fine, swimming a fair distance with it and, doing, dives over an hour and just popping up. But we had flotation devices on it so I could alter the buoyancy. And at the end of the shoot, I'd just bring it to the surface and we'd have a little Zodiac would come over, would clip it on and they'd tow me back to the big boat. So, yeah. But it's this big, heavy, bulky gear, which to get it in the positions that historically I've done for other, documentaries, normal TV documentaries, where the gear's a lot smaller and stuff like that, it's very hard. And also you must think of the poor old animals, thinking instead of a camera this big, something like this big coming at them going, what is that? So, you have to let the animals get relaxed with your presence and spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah. Underwater.
Underwater, yes.
Can you share a behind-the-scenes story about making the film?
Yeah, there's lots. The one thing I know is whales. When you're shooting the 3D in the dome, you can't have any sun in the shot, and you're facing the direction away from the sun. And the whales know that, and they'll just sit behind you and play and do all these amazing things. And you keep looking at them, going, "Oh, you buggers," and just waiting for them to come around. But the hardest shot in the whole film is actually the seahorse giving birth. So male seahorses get pregnant.
That's my favorite thing in the world.
They get the big tummy, and then out come, almost 800 babies. But we never know exactly when it's going to happen.
Right.
You know for about, within 2 or 3 days. So it was one of those periods where I had no assistance around or anything at all, and I actually sat there for 72 hours straight, because you get 5 minutes notice, and it's all over in 15 seconds. So
wow.
I was just sitting there drinking Red Bull and drinking lots of cola and watching movies while waiting for the seahorse to give birth. It was actually at the university where I work. There's a big seagrass research unit there as well with the aquarium system there, and it was in one of those tanks. And so eventually the babies popped, and then I ran upstairs to back up the cards because like 2 hours later we had to head out to sea on another shoot. And while we're backing up the cards, I must have just passed out in the chair, rolled backwards, fell off backwards and landed on the leg of another chair and popped the cartilage in just next to the sternum. So it was very painful. So forget the sharks and everything else. The baby seahorses was the most painful shoot, physically, mentally, and emotionally.
Yeah, and your biggest injury was in a chair.
In a chair. See, officers, dangerous things.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a good story. What's been your most memorable moment in underwater filming? Anything you filmed?
Oh,
I know, making you go back.
Back. Oh, probably the first time I was in the water with the tigers and realised how approachable they were. There's been so many magic moments. It's really hard to think, but the thing about shooting underwater, which is different to above water, like if you go to Africa, you can have a super long lens and zoom in on a lion, hundreds of yards away. Underwater, if you get something within 10 or 15 yards, that's a good day. So you're working with less visibility, and you have to establish relationships with the animals that they are at ease with your presence, so then they're doing their natural thing, whether it's feeding or reproduction. And to be there at the moments where you get to see that more intimate side of their life, the reproduction and the feeding, that's always the biggest high.
Yeah. What do you hope audiences will take away from Great Barrier Reef?
I hope they know the barrier reef's still alive. It's under a lot of threat. That threat is because of climate change. And so everyone in the world needs to become a citizen of the barrier reef and do whatever you can do wherever you are in the world to minimise our carbon footprint and try and turn around climate change. It will help. The good news is we have, all the tools are out there now. We're not waiting for some mythical technology to come. It all just comes down to the will of people trying to implement all these new technologies that we have, and so we can reverse the trends of climate change.
We can do it.
We can do it.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for being here. This is Richard Fitzpatrick at the Fleet Science Center with the new giant screen film Great Barrier Reef playing daily in the Giant Dome Theater. Thank you.
Ciao.
They say ciao in Australia?
Occasionally.